Hey, welcome to another episode of the Go-To Physio Podcast. And today's episode is all about the Go-To Clinic Head Physio Dashboard, essential metrics for your clinical success. And when I talk about clinical success, I'm talking about two components here. First of all, I'm talking about your clinical system and achieving clinical excellence for yourself and your therapists. But I'm also talking about clinical success in the terms for you, the clinic owner, which is you have a profitable clinic that's growing in the most simple and sustainable way that ultimately delivers for you and your family and ultimately gives you freedom. Now, why do we want to track some key numbers as part of our Go-To Clinic Head Physio Dashboard? Well, I'm going to start off with this quote from Todd Herman, which is the language of high performance is numbers. Now, after working in professional sport for over the last 15 plus years, I've seen my fair share of numbers. And I would probably argue in some environments that I've been in, we've put too much of an emphasis on numbers. And in other environments, we probably didn't look at the numbers enough. And as always, the art of this is truly understanding the numbers, but most importantly, how to change the numbers. And that's what I want to talk about in the coming episodes. So the language of high performers is numbers, and the language of go-to therapists is numbers. Because the beauty of numbers is it takes all of the emotion out of the decision making, or it tells ultimately what did happen. Okay. And very often in the clinic, when we look at our results and our patient results, our egos can sometimes get in the way. Whereas actually when we take all of the emotion out of the decision making and we look at the numbers of what did happen, then very often they can tell a different story. Most importantly of all then is we can see the opportunities to improve. And I think that's the key thing here, is why high performers like numbers is they don't look at it as a way, and clinic owners and go-to clinic owners don't look at it as a way to punish their therapists or hold their numbers against them. We look at it as opportunities to improve our performance, which then, as a second order consequence, the profits, the clinical outcomes, all of those things take care of itself. So I think that's really important to understand when we look at the numbers, okay? And if we want a measurable number, the gold standard here that we want to set our subconscious mind and our brains to, and our reticular activating system to, is becoming that go-to therapist that can discharge 90% of patients into raving fans. And again, we can leverage our net promoter scores and our business systems in order to actually objectively look at this. Now, again, we want to have a stretch goal to keep us growing, okay? So again, whether that's a realistic target or not, that's a conversation for another day. But we want a target so big that it keeps us growing day upon day, and we continue to learn. Now, the key thing with numbers is numbers are an output. They're what we would call a lagging indicator. So lagging means the numbers tell us what happened after the event. Okay. So again, if we as clinic owners, we want the ideal gold standard of, every patient that comes in, out of all of them, 90% of them go on and they are discharged and they're raving fans. We want ideally our cancellations or our cancelled did not read books or drop-offs to be less than 8%. And I'll talk about those numbers in a second. We want our net promoter score to be world class. Okay. Again, our net promoter score being on a scale of 1 to 10, how likely are you to recommend your friends or family to us? We want 5-star reviews. We want referrals. Now, these aren't the Head Physio Dashboard, just to be clear, but these are the things that all clinic owners would certainly strive for or want to be striving for. Okay. So what we want is we want a Head Physio Dashboard that's going to give us indications if we're on track to achieving these lagging metrics. And the key thing here, before I introduce the numbers, is numbers are outputs. And the beauty of understanding that is inputs equals outputs. So the actions that we take, which are the inputs, will lead to the outputs. And if our go-to clinic Head Physio Dashboard numbers or outputs aren't where we want them to be, then what that really means is that the inputs that's happening, okay, or said another way, there's something not happening in the clinic on a daily basis to lead to those outputs. And that's the opportunity that we have in order to fix those numbers in the most simple and direct path. And they're actually not that hard to fix. And I've worked with a lot of clinicians now over the years, especially in our go-to clinic mentorship now. I'm looking at the numbers and coaching therapists with the numbers on a weekly basis. And I can pretty much see straight away based on the numbers what isn't happening in the treatment room, because I've done it for my own clinicians, and we're doing it more and more for other clinicians. So what are the Go-To Clinic Head Physio Dashboard standards? And again, these are our numbers. These are the numbers that I track. Depending on your industry, your sector and stuff like that, your patient visit average, for example, might be a little bit different. Okay. So again, if you're seeing an ACL population predominantly, your patient visit average is going to be a lot higher. Okay. So again, it just depends. I'm doing this for a bog standard private practice, essentially. Okay. So what are the Go-To Clinic standards? Well, the Go-To Clinic standards essentially are the numbers that's taking all of the emotion out of the decision making. And what they're doing is they're essentially tracking your patient journey. So if we look at a new patient that comes in, the first number we're going to want to track is our IA rebook percentage. So again, I'll go through the definitions in a little bit more detail shortly, but that's essentially the number of patients that come in for their first appointment and they rebook again, and they ideally turn up for the second session. The bought plan, okay, for us is if you offer packages of care, and I'll talk about that again in a little bit more detail. So again, if you offer packages for patients, we want one out of two of those patients to buy a package, assuming they have the financial means to do so. And that's a great litmus test for us, that the patient has bought into the treatment plan, they've bought into the therapist, they've bought into the methodology, and they're ready to go. And there's a lot to be said for packages. I'm not talking about packages where we get patients in, we do the same thing every single session. I'm talking about a plan where we have a clear progression and milestone every single session for the patient. And if you can get patients into packages, that's going to have a big impact then in all of the rest of the numbers, because your drop-off percentages, if you look at your drop-off percentages of patients who cancelled, did not rebook, and did not attend, I can pretty much guarantee you the 99.9% of those patients are the patients that aren't on packages. It helps your patient visit average, and most importantly, it gives you enough time and your clinicians enough time to actually get the results for the patients to generate the reviews and the referrals. So there's a lot to be said for actual packages of care in terms of an effectiveness percentage of your clinicians and an efficiency percentage of your business. So we'll talk a lot about that, and we'll actually dedicate a full episode to that of how to improve those numbers in the coming weeks. Your drop-off percentage, that's again the people that either cancelled and didn't rebook, or they didn't turn up the session. So again, if someone rings up the clinic and they rearrange their appointment for next week, we're not including those people in those numbers. Okay, and again, I'll go into that in a little bit more detail of exactly how we calculate them. Your patient visit average, that's obviously then you can see as we get that patient. Now we've looked at our IA rebook rate, our package conversion. That a lot of that is around the inputs that need to happen in the initial assessment, essentially. Now, as we start to look at the drop-off percentage in your patient visit average, you're going to be able to then start to track the metrics of what's happening or what isn't happening in sessions 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, etc. So again, if patients are dropping off and your therapist has a patient visit average of 2 or 3, then I can clearly see that we're not making momentum in the first few sessions. If your therapist has a drop-off rate of less than 8%, but actually their patient visit average is 6 or 7, then I can tell that that's probably a bridging the gap from low to high level issue there, where the therapist may lack clarity in where to go next with the patient, or that hasn't been clearly communicated. So we can use the numbers to see input, output. And again, I don't say this in a big-headed way or anything like that, but I've mentored over 1,000 therapists now. And when I say mentored, we've been on calls, we've looked at their numbers, we've troubleshooted, we've improved these numbers. So this isn't something that sounds good in theory. This is something we live and breathe every single day. So when I look at what's not happening in inputs and outputs, that's based on well over 10,000 hours of doing this. Okay, so again, I don't want this to come across as something that sounds good in theory. This is the stuff that we live and breathe every day here in our clinic, both backstage of what happens here at Pro Sport Physio, but also from working with other therapists. And again, I can see clearly based on the numbers now of exactly what isn't and what is happening in a clinic. And as I said, the beauty of this is it takes the ego out of the decision making, okay? Because it's the output of what actually has happened. So the utilization then, ideally we want that to be above 70%. Okay, we probably want that to be a little bit higher. Again, there'll be some clinic owners want that to be 90 plus. The interesting thing of working with a lot of clinic owners now, and again, this is getting into real talk here and real world and not ideal talk of we want their utilization to be 90%, is there's going to be a certain percentage utilization percentage in your clinic where your therapists start to crack. Okay, what do I mean by crack? Your therapist's numbers start to drop. They get stressed, they get overwhelmed, they get sick. Okay, their energy starts to go downhill. So a lot of therapists will display this in different ways. Now, some clinicians can get to 90% utilized and they're absolutely fine. You have some therapists, you'll get them past 75, 80%, and lo and behold, they start getting sick, they start getting stressed, and then everything else starts to fall apart. So there is a cracking point in the real world with clinicians where the utilization percentage, you need to start understanding that for your clinic, but also for your individual therapists. Okay. And again, this is the art and actually understanding and being in the clinic, because, it's easy for me to say here, your utilization should be 90%. Okay. But in the real world, that's very different, because one clinician can maintain it. You put another clinician 90%, they're going to last a month, they'll leave the clinic. Okay. Because they're going to be unhappy. So again, you have to get that balance. It's never been harder to recruit good therapists now. So again, it's the actual art and science of all of this is in the nuances of understanding the numbers in the real world, rather than just making this about here it is, that's it, in black and white. There's no gray area here. Of course there is. So why do we want to track those? Well, the three big growth levers for you, the three ways that you can grow your business. You can increase your lifetime value of patients ethically, of who you already have in there. You can improve your sales conversions, or you can optimize your best performing marketing channels. They're the three major growth levers you can pull. And again, the key thing here we want with our standards is if we can get our clinical standards up to these points, the beauty of that is you're really maximizing your growth levers 1 and 2. So if we've got an IA rebook rate into clinical standards, patients are buying packages, which gives us the best chance of patient visit averages being higher, our therapists are being utilized, and that means then that we're also improving our sales conversions. The beauty of this is then when we spend money on marketing and acquiring more new patients, we can afford to spend more, because whoever can afford to spend the most money in your area to acquire a customer wins. Okay. So what this allows you to do is you can dominate your area then. Okay. But a lot of clinicians do is they focus on growth lever number 3 first. They try to get more and more new patients. Their Head Physio Dashboard numbers are poor, or some of them don't even know it. So then we're not getting the true ROI on our ad spend. And that's the beauty of this going 1, 2. If you put the hard work in at the start, you get that right, then you can afford to spend a lot more than your competitors. So it's pretty hard not to win. Okay. So it's about working smarter, not harder. So again, if we look at that patient journey, and I'll talk, there's 6 key stages of your patient journey, which I'll dedicate a full episode to shortly. These are tracking your patient journey. So we have our business systems, which are the systems that will track the patient journey to deliver a world-class customer experience. But these numbers are the clinical tracking of your patient's journey. So the key definitions here, the IA rebook percentage. So this is one of our cheat sheets we have in our Go-To Clinic Mastermind for our members. The IA rebook, the percentage of initial assessments that result in a patient booking follow-up appointment. Okay, so again, with that, how many new appointments did you have this week? How many rebooked? Okay, put that over that, you get your percentage. Your conversion, your package conversions, the percentage of your IAs that rebooked and committed to a full treatment package and have purchased the packages, we want that to be about 50%. Or cancelled, did not rebook. So what we do with that is we go, okay, here's the total appointments you've seen this week, you've treated. Here's the number of patients that cancelled and didn't rebook. Okay, and again, I'm not talking about patients that rebooked for next week. It's the patients that said they'd cancel and they haven't rebooked yet. Okay, and again, that could be genuine for some patients. It could be illness. For other patients, it could be just a silent objection. Okay, so we add those numbers up. We add the numbers of did not attend, so the people that just didn't attend at all. We put those two numbers, the cancel that didn't rebook and the did not attend, we add those together and we add them to your total appointments that you've seen, because this is the total potential appointments you could have seen, assuming they've all rebooked. And again, I know a person will say, well, what if someone took that appointment, etc. Okay, don't complicate the process. So add those. So add your cancellation, did not rebook, you did not attend, and then divide them over the total number of potential appointments, and that will work out your cancel, did not rebook. Again, we think it's fair to be around 8%, okay, less than 8% from our clinic, and working with some very, very good clinics that have mastered growth levers 1 and 2. We feel 8% is around that at the moment, okay? And again, that's from experience. That's not a number that we've plucked out of the air. Okay, we think it's fair to our clinicians. And again, the beauty of this is that some of those cancelled did not rebooks as well will be genuine excuses, but it's just having that alert system in your business if somebody isn't getting right, and it's a silent objection. Okay, your utilization rate. Okay, how many hours could your therapist potentially treat this week, and then how many hours did they actually spend treating? And again, how many hours could your therapist potentially treat? So for us, we give them an hour and a bit for in-service training every week and team meetings. Okay, so our therapist could potentially treat around 36 hours. We don't take in the blocks. So if they block their diary for notes and stuff like that, they've blocked their diary for notes, that's still an hour they could have been treating. Okay, so you need to keep this clear cut. So we would put it at 36 hours because we give them an hour and a half for the in-service training and the team meeting. Okay, so strictly they could potentially see 36 hours a week treating. How many hours were they actually treating and treating patients? Because when they treat patients, that's the revenue generating activities. Okay, and then work out that. Then your patient visit average, that one's a little bit trickier, and I've seen different ways to do it. So how we do it is we'll select the last 30 initial assessments over the last 13 weeks, from 13 weeks ago. So this is something your patient visit average, you're not going to want to look at that weekly. Okay, monthly isn't too bad, and then quarterly will give you probably a much better overview as well. So that's the beauty of the Head Physio Dashboard, is we can zoom in weekly, and then we can zoom out monthly and quarterly as well. This is select the last 30 initial assessments over 13 weeks ago, because we're assuming then at 13 weeks that the majority of patients would have been discharged at this point. Okay, so that's why we're doing 13 weeks. The total number of sessions attended by these patients divided by 30. Okay, so add up all of the sessions that your last 30 patients had from 13 weeks ago, divide that by 30, and you'll get your patient visit average. Okay, so for a 12-month PVA, include all the IAs from the past 12 months that are more than 13 weeks ago, and then obviously divide them by the number of patients. So again, that one, I've seen other ways doing it. This is how we do it, and it's simple. Okay, so it'll make a big difference. I'm not going to go into how we use this now, but for now, I just want to introduce you to these gold standards in this episode. In the coming episode, I'm going to show you how to use this Head Physio Dashboard to double your profits without needing new patients. And I'll show you also all of these metrics to improve and the key inputs that need to improve. But for this episode, I just want you to introduce you to this. I want you just getting to think about this, just to understand essentially the numbers and why you would want to track these numbers. But I also want you to see here as well the opportunity for growth by focusing on these numbers. Because what happens is when you start to look at these numbers, you start to see the opportunities then for actual growth in the business, okay, without constantly needing more and more new patients, okay? So I want you to understand the numbers. I want you to understand how to track these numbers. Hopefully you're starting to understand the value of all of these numbers, okay? And now when you go through that process, I want you to start looking at the gaps in your clinic for both clinical excellence of achieving patient outcomes, but also profit that could be potentially drifting away a little bit, okay? Because it's very, very possible for you to grow your clinic, to have ethical profits, which is driven by patients achieving their outcomes. It's very, very realistic for you to be able to double your profits while achieving clinical excellence, all by knowing your numbers. And that's going to allow you then not to constantly chase new patients. And when we do then put money and we invest in marketing, we can afford to outspend our competition because we've increased our lifetime value ethically. We've improved our sales conversions by ultimately getting these numbers right. Okay, so that's it for this week. If you want to know more about this, obviously head over to the go-to-physio.com. If you have a look at our mastermind program, that's essentially where we've got all the SOPs of how to track these. We've got the Head Physio dashboards and all of that as well. If you just want some help training your clinicians to improve these numbers, or Train My Clinician program is essentially that. What we do is we'll get your therapist in, we'll get their current numbers. Again, if you don't know these numbers or how to find them, we'll help you with that. We've got cheat sheets and all of that good stuff there to get those numbers. And then we'll train your clinician to ultimately improve these numbers. But we'll train your clinician to be able to make sense of the patient's symptoms, confidently explain the problem, solution, and plan. So we'll attack this through a clinical excellence point of view with your therapist, which is the key inputs that need to happen to then drive these outputs for you. Okay, so you've got your Go-To Clinic Mastermind program. If you're a clinic owner, if you just want your therapist trained up, trained clinician is the one for you. If you're a therapist working for someone else in private practice, you just want to achieve clinical excellence, you want to use numbers because they are the language of high performers, then the Go-To Therapist Mentorship will be a good option for you. Okay, so that's it for this week. I'll see you in the next episode when we're going to continue our journey with the Head Physio Dashboard. I'm going to show you how to use certain frameworks with these numbers, and most importantly, I'm going to show you the key inputs that need to happen in order to change these numbers to achieve clinical excellence, but also to achieve clinical success for you as the clinic owner. I'll see you next time. Thanks for tuning in to this week's show. I hope you enjoyed it. Now, if you'd like a free copy of my Head Physio Systems 6-step checklist that I use to personally audit my own therapists to make sure that they can keep patients progressing even when the pain is eased, so that we can ethically increase our patient numbers, our revenues and referrals, head over to www.thegotophysio.com/checklist and I'll get that sent straight over to you. That's it for this week. I'll see you in next week's show.